Everybody, let's talk about your next paper. This paper is called Process Analysis. So the idea with this paper is that you explain the steps in doing something or how a process works. We are also going to add some more steps to this. So we're going to also look at whether the process is effective and efficient, and also how we could improve the process with some simple solutions. So for this paper, you will complete the following steps. So I'm giving this to you as a process for your process analysis paper. So step 1, read the chapter in the textbook. It has really great discussion of what exactly is involved in process. Now, some of you may have done process before. If you've done a process speech, a how-to speech, something like that. I will tell you though, typically that type of assignment is asking you to do directional, where you give directions to create a product, so a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something like that. That is not the type of process that I'm asking you to write about. I'm asking you to do explanatory process. So this is to explain how a process works out in the world to accomplish a goal, rather than doing something that produces a product that I can touch. Okay, so those are a little bit different, and I want to make sure that you do explanatory. So make sure you read the textbook so you're very clear about what kind of I'm asking you to do. Okay, so one is how to do something, one is how something is done. But we're going to even take it a little bit deeper than that. So you're not just giving me a process, you're also going to analyze that process. What steps of the process work? What steps of the process don't work very well? So you need to choose a process that has some flaws to it, that could be improved. Okay, so don't choose a process that you think works great the way it is, because that's not this assignment. All right, then the problem solving part of that is then you're going to offer solutions, ways we could improve the process, make it more efficient, make it more effective, make it more cost friendly, all kinds of options, but what are ways we could improve the process? So the example I'm going to use is the process of voting. So I'm not producing a product, I'm actually meeting a goal, which is casting my ballot. Okay, so that's a type of explanatory process. So I'm just explaining to you the process that you would go through to vote. So in step 2, you need to brainstorm your topic. Okay, you have to decide on a process you want to speak about. This should be a process that you are familiar with, that you are comfortable discussing, that you know the ins and outs of. Maybe you've done multiple times, but again, it also needs to be a process that could be improved. So I currently vote here in Neosho, and my voting location is Neosho High School. And I'm sure you can understand why voting at a high school could cause some problems. So that's the process I will choose. So then step 3, I need to choose my thesis. What is my purpose? Am I writing to inform, or am I writing to persuade? So am I persuading you that this is the process, but there's a better way, or just informing you that influences the tone I choose, how I write about the process? So you're going to decide, are you just informing us about the process or persuading us about something specific? Okay. Also, do you have a problem-solving process? So is there something that needs to be improved about the process? And then third, what is your attitude about the process? Because you want to maintain a consistent tone when you're speaking about this, when you're speaking about your topic throughout the entire paper. Also, who's your audience? For this paper, I want you to write to a particular person. So whoever has control over the process, okay? So the boss, whoever the boss is, okay? Somebody who actually could make potential changes to the process to improve it, okay? Now, that also means because this person is in charge of this process, this person understands the basic ideas of the process. So you need to make sure that you're giving your audience good, clear, substantial, educated, in-depth details, because just a general overview of the process, the person to whom you're speaking already knows that if they're in control of the process. So you really want to get into the specifics, okay? And then how should this paper be organized? probably chronologically, right? You're going to tell us how these things happen in order as they happen. So then for the thesis, you're going to need 2 parts. What is your process, and why is this process, why is improving the process important to people? So why should we care that we need to improve the process? So something for my voting example, improving the process of voting at Neosho High School in Southwest Missouri will improve voter turnout. That's a reason why people might care, because the more people who vote, the better. And the more representative our votes are of the public. And so that's always a good thing for democracy. And so that could be a potential thesis for me. So your topic is improving what process? Okay. And then your so what is, and why do we care? Why should we even care that we need to improve it? How will it affect us? Or how will it affect your audience? What is something your particular person you're writing to would care about? So, I would write to the Secretary of State because that's the person in charge of voting in the state of Missouri. And I am sure that the Secretary of State cares about voter turnout. Because again, the more people who turn out, the better. And so, that's something that person will care about. So you want to make sure you have a so what that appeals to the person you choose. So for pre-writing for this paper, you're going to do an outline, or you should do an outline of the major and minor steps, because even usually simple steps also have minor steps underneath them. And so you need to make sure that you give very, very specific details, because remember, your audience, the person to whom you're going to write this, probably has a general understanding of what the process is. So you need to make sure that it's very specific and write to that audience. Okay. And then you're going to identify what steps you are going to, or you think could be improved. So as you're describing the process to us, you want to also analyze each step of the process. So give us step 1, and then is it effective or not? Okay. So make sure you're doing that as you go throughout the paper, okay, and as you're planning. All right. And then when you're ready to draft, your introduction needs to include a thesis, as well as any background information we need to understand. So maybe for my voting example, I can tell you that I voted in 4 presidential elections, and I vote in most local elections as well. So I voted many, many times in my life. And I've also voted in 3 different locations in 3 different states. So I have some experience with what other people do as far as voting. You might also want to include why you chose this particular process. So why are you bothering to write this person and tell them about the process and how to improve it? Maybe how does it affect you personally, besides the idea of just, my English teacher made me write it. And so, give us a little bit of background in the introduction. Please be sure you use transitions. Otherwise, this paper will sound very choppy. And because the paragraphs may be short, depending on how long it takes you to describe each step of the process. So you need very clear transitions that help us move from one step to the next step, to show connection between one step and the next step, and also to help the paper flow so it doesn't sound very choppy. So be careful with that one. Each new action or new step in the process needs to be a new paragraph. So again, some of the paragraphs may be shorter, some of them may be longer, kind of depends on your process and what the steps look like. Okay. Also, you need to tell us not only what are the steps, but why. So what does each step accomplish? What's the purpose of the step? And then, is it working well or not? So, and then if it's not working well, then we need to offer some solutions. So speaking of offering solutions, you have 2 options. You can either offer solutions to steps as you go. So maybe step 2, you say, is not very effective. And by making this one small change, we could make it better. And then maybe again in step 4, you say, and this step doesn't work very well. Here's why it doesn't work very well. And here is a potential solution. Or if you have one overall solution that would make the process better, you could make it as you could put that as a separate paragraph that would come at the end before the intro or before the conclusion. Okay, so kind of depends on your process where you put the solution part of it. So think of this as problem solution somewhat. but keep in mind that you do need to offer solutions. Okay. Finally, don't be too hostile to your audience. Sometimes when we're talking about things that don't work, we tend to be critical and angry, and we don't want to do that because these are people of authority, of power, maybe potentially a boss of yours. And of course, you don't want to do that to your boss. So you need to choose a tone that is appropriate to the audience to whom you are speaking. You will write this paper as a letter. So you do need to have the typical MLA heading, but then after that, you need dear so-and-so and whoever that is. And then at the end of it, make sure that you also have sincerely and sign your name. Okay, so this will look like a business letter. So make sure that it looks like that. Okay. So just to give you an example, here's my voting example. I vote here at the high school. Typically, I have to vote early in the morning or about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which I'm sure you can imagine causes some issues because I'm competing for parking spaces with all of these high school students, and the traffic is very heavy those times of day. So that's one issue, is trying to even just find a place to park. Then I have to walk across a very, very busy road that's also a hill, and it's at the bottom of a hill. And so cars are coming by very quickly. So safety is a concern for me. And not just for me, lots of elderly people vote, and they have to also walk across that very, very busy road, and that always makes me nervous. Once you go in, or once I go in to vote, that process is typically smooth. The ladies who run the polling place have been doing it for decades, and they know what they're doing. So usually that goes very quickly. They scan my ID. I sign I sign the pad saying, yes, that's who I am. They hand me my ballot. No big deal. The next problem is voting is supposed to be private and quiet. And I'm sure you can imagine that the foyer of a high school, especially at 7:30 in the morning or about 3:30 in the afternoon, is neither of those things, quiet or private. It's right next to the gymnasium, so kids are practicing, coming in and out of the gym. The band room is also right next door. So, band practice is going on. It is very loud, very hectic, chaotic, and not what voting should be. Also, the foyer is very small, so they can only set up 5 or 6 booths in that space, in that area. And so, sometimes you have to wait quite a while to vote, especially in the big elections, the presidential elections usually. So that can be kind of burdensome. Then once I'm done, or once I go into the little booth to vote, they typically have pins there. However, sometimes people walk off with the pins, and then there's nothing to use to mark my ballot. So that sometimes is a problem. After I'm done, they have a machine that just sucks my ballot right in there and counts it. And so that is very efficient. And they hand me my little sticker that says I voted in Newton County, which is always nice. And my kids are usually with me, and so they get their little stickers, and they think that's fun. But then I have to take my kids back across that very busy road and again compete for parking spaces with all of the high school students. So you can see there are a lot of issues with the process of voting at Neosho High School. So rather than offer suggestions for each one of those along the way, what I would do is in a separate paragraph at the end before the conclusion is I would say my suggestion would be to move the voting, those who vote, to one of the larger churches in town. Typically, election days are on Tuesdays, and there isn't much happening at churches on Tuesdays. And they have great parking, and they have handicap parking. And it's very quiet and private. And so I think that would offer a better solution. Or a community center or something like that. I just think schools are not a great place to actually vote because they're neither quiet nor private, and the parking usually isn't good. So it doesn't work very well. Also, another issue I might bring up is that also means they have to leave the school open to the public, which is a security risk for the students. It's something as a teacher I think about, and makes me a little nervous that they have to leave so many doors unlocked on voting days, especially because sometimes voting days are somewhat contentious days in America. And so, it just makes me a little nervous that we're leaving our students unprotected and inviting, people in and not knowing who they are necessarily. So that's probably another issue I would bring up. And I think something that my audience would care about is student safety. So anyway, just some things to think about when writing this paper. Remember, it needs to be a process. Then you need to analyze what works and doesn't work. By the way, make sure you tell me the steps that do work. Tell me why they do work and why they're okay. But analyze it for the good and the bad, and then offer some solutions to it. So there are 3 parts to this paper. You need to make sure you have all 3 parts to do well on this paper. All right. Other than that, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I will see you later. Happy writing.